definitely two eyes on the ground.
How far? Are you at the edge of the gully?
Yep, that way, right up the gully.
This one. So you see this one here?
Yeah.
It goes all the way up. Look at this pressure that it was pulled under and pinned with this other log here.
There's no way that could have happened from this falling on it.
Yeah, I know.
The only way I could see that happening naturally is like snow weight making it bend, and then this guy falls on top.
By coincidence during the winter
Yeah,
season.
exactly. Yeah.
That is a very reasonable thing. But like look, so yeah, so both of these are both rooted still, I believe. But this one comes over under tremendous pressure.
Yeah.
And then this one perfectly pins it. Where it is seems very strategic, or possibly strategic. And then the same prints, same length, same width, and same stride length are down on the water, crossing from east to west. So it's almost like it's traveling from across the roadway, making a decision about what properties it's going to investigate, going down through the gully, hitting the water, and crossing over. And so you get that same stride length, and you see it crossing over obstacles. So if this was a rabbit hopping in sequence, it would underduck all of these logs and the fallen structures, but it's not. It's stepping on all of them. So we're talking about waist-high obstacles where a rabbit can duck underneath, but it's going over top.
Yeah.
When some people think of Sasquatch, they imagine a large, hairy, bipedal ape-like creature that discreetly roams the secluded forest areas of North America. But there are other people who think there's more to this Bigfoot mystery, more than the generally accepted idea that the Sasquatch is just an undiscovered ape being. There's been growing popularity in theories that one would consider to be more out there. Theories describing the Sasquatch as a being that can travel from one plane of existence to another. Theories that link the Sasquatch directly to the UFO and ET phenomena. And theories that Sasquatch wields supernatural abilities, such as the ability to cloak. Even though I've experienced my fair share of strange happenings in the outdoors, I've always been very reluctant to explore these ideas. But what kind of explorer would I be if I wasn't even open to the possibilities?
Ever since I started looking into Bigfoot, I've always been more of a believer in the classic flesh and blood theory. That's how I've been going about all my investigations since I started the YouTube channel. I'm always usually pretty quick to dismiss the ideas that, there's a supernatural or paranormal element to the Bigfoot creature. Just because believing in Bigfoot or investigating Bigfoot like that is kind of crazy enough already. There's already so much mystery, even just being, like, if it is a physical creature, there's so many elements already that make it seem so fantastic. And I want to find answers to my simplest questions first, before I start investigating, the idea that it can cross between dimensions or it has the ability to cloak, and, the theories go way out there. Obviously, it would seem easiest to go out looking for an actual animal, an animal that leaves footprints, an animal that leaves evidence behind of its existence. And when you're dealing with something paranormal, it's a lot harder to gather that kind of evidence. There are paranormal investigators that can pick up audio recordings and EVPs and whatnot. And there's also a lot of recordings of like light orbs and different manifestations of these entities. I guess the main reason why I started to look into the supernatural Bigfoot theories is because I already am a believer in like extraterrestrial life and aliens and UFOs. I'm big into that. I like reading about that kind of stuff. And I'm also into the paranormal. So if I'm interested in those things and, you know, I have no problem believing in those things, then why am I so quick to, I guess, dismiss them in the case of Bigfoot? Like, I've always leaned towards Bigfoot being like a real creature, like an actual animal. But it'd be kind of silly and I guess ignorant of me to just completely ignore all the other theories. If I'm investigating the subject, I should be investigating all the theories and not ignoring what, you know, all these other people have to say. And there are a lot of accounts of, you know, what people would call supernatural Sasquatch activity, you know. It can range anything from the cloaking Bigfoot, you know, the interdimensional Bigfoot where it can cross in between like our plane of existence and some other realm. And cases of what they call mind speak, where the Bigfoot creatures are using telepathy to communicate with, you know, select individuals from even the comfort of their own homes. So it can get very strange. And there are people that swear by this, and I've always been very, very skeptical. And just because I'm looking into this stuff and investigating it and reading about it does not mean that that's what I believe. There's a lot of people that get confused when I start looking into things and I start, you know, investigating these crazy theories. They automatically assume that I believe that. But just because I'm looking into it doesn't mean that's what I believe. I'm still skeptical of even a lot of flesh and blood encounters that people claim to have had. So, you know, I'll always probably lean more to the physical element of Bigfoot, the physical theories, where it's a flesh and blood animal. And I think it would just be a good practice to investigate all these other theories, just so, you know, I'm not kind of limiting myself. I don't have that tunnel vision. I can see the whole picture. That's why I'm doing it. Sometimes when you hear something walking, it's just a regular four-legged animal, even if it sounds different. Like, I've been walking through this section of bush, and at one point I could hear something walking, and it sounded odd, and I did a big loop, thinking maybe it could be a deer, and it was just a little coyote. So small animals can make what seems to be, you know, a big sound in the woods. It sounded like it was bigger than a coyote, but I chased it off. I'm just scouting different locations and trying to find a decent spot to explore for the winter. Jeez, should have brought a machete in here. It's really thick. Lots of willows. I was thinking, you know, I spend a lot of my time in the mountains and in mountainous areas, and I'm out here right now. It's more of a prairie area, lots of grasslands and little pieces of bush here and there. What do you guys think of all these reports of, you know, like the grassman, Ohio grassman? Seems to be in a location where there's not as much forest. And, you know, grassman, they call it the grassman. So it's in grassy areas. Like, can something really exist in these spots? Is there lots of hiding spots? I don't know. It just seems odd to me that something could remain hidden. You know, something the size of a Sasquatch in some of these areas. But there's even been reports in Alberta here. You know, Sasquatch reports in more rural areas where there's lots of agriculture, not so much in mountainous regions. So I think that's very interesting, and the reports seem to be getting closer and closer to the cities like Edmonton. You know, we're having reports that are like an hour away, hour and a half away, which is insane. You know? Are they credible? I don't know. But there is, you know, lots of forest in Alberta, there's no doubt about that. There's lots of open country. There's lots of agriculture, lots of farms. So, who knows? Who knows how brave they would get, how close they would come to the major settlements.
Like, this looks weird here. This looks like an X. And you know, you got the levitating branch just hanging in there. It's been over 4 years since I started this strange Bigfoot journey, this weird quest to find this, you know, mystical ape creature that's roaming the forests of North America. I've been going into it with the same mindset that I'm looking for a physical creature that's leaving behind footprints, leaving behind potential hair samples. It's making these crazy noises and screams and building these elaborate tree structures. I mean, when I see tree structures, I assume, obviously, like most people would, that it's a physical being constructing them. You know, whether it be from a human, you know, it could be hoaxed from a human, or it could be a Sasquatch. But when I look at stuff like that, I don't imagine like these branches just like levitating into the air and, you know, assembling themselves into these bizarre structures. I imagine physical beings, you know, a physical Sasquatch doing it, you know, a powerful beast. It just makes the most sense to me. This past year has been extremely interesting as far as reports go. There's been an increase in Sasquatch sightings that have been occurring closer and closer to more populated areas. To me, it just didn't make sense. Why would this extremely elusive creature, if it exists, want to risk detection in these locations? Are the reports even made by trustworthy people? An even bigger question is, because I'm looking into investigating the Sasquatch under the idea that it could have paranormal or supernatural abilities, how would I even go about proving or disproving this? I have enough trouble trying to track down an 800-pound, 9-foot-tall ape beast that walks on 2 legs.
This most recent case came like at the perfect time. I'm investigating the supernatural Sasquatch stuff. You know, it's exactly what I want to research, and it seems to have an almost paranormal element to it. I started getting these messages. We have like a Sasquatch group chat with the Alberta Sasquatch Organization, and we started getting reports of, you know, a gentleman who was having these visitors come into his yard at night, and they were throwing rocks at his house and, you know, making strange noises, and there's strange footprints left in the snow with like really long strides, and they were big prints. It appeared as if something was sneaking into his yard. And he lives in a kind of agricultural part of the province, not extremely forested, and there's other people, you know, around, not very close. You know, it's like a couple kilometers away there'll be another house, and your neighbors are pretty widespread. And this kind of stuff was happening night after night. It happened for like 4 nights, and the guy was getting really, really scared. He ended up calling me one night after he got home from work, and it was almost as soon as he stepped on his property, activity started to pick up. Like, these creatures were there. They were trying to interact with him. And it was just coincidentally, this place is 35 minutes away from where I live, so it's highly convenient for me to go investigate it. So when he called me, I was like, yeah, like, I'm kind of thinking maybe I should just rip out there right now and have a look. If these creatures are there, this could be like my one chance to actually see one of these things, which would be incredible. So that's what I decided to do. I packed up all the gear I could as quickly as I could, went in my vehicle and started driving out there. And on the way, I just had a very nervous feeling because I didn't know what I was going to get into.
Hey guys, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this very well. The autofocus is on, but I'm on my way to this location where this guy's been being harassed for like 4 days. And I just got off the phone with him. I told him I was going to come now because these creatures, apparently there's 2 of them, are at his place right now. And they've been throwing rocks at the house. There's a really, really good chance that when I pull up in the yard, these things might be there. They might be right in front of the house. They might be beside the garage. They've been coming up close and throwing rocks at his house and his garage and himself. So I'm going to have the camera, my main camera, sitting on the dash when I roll in. Audio will be recording, but I don't know what I'm going to do because I don't personally know if I'm ready to see what one of these things look like. I don't know. Part of me doesn't want to. Like, I feel extremely nervous right now. Nervous and scared, and I almost feel a bit sick, just knowing what I'm going into by myself. I mean, he's gonna be there, his dog's gonna be there, but stepping into the bush in this area is gonna be very unsettling.
Sure enough, there was strange tracks in the snow. We ended up finding, you know, a very textbook Sasquatch footprint. The exact shape, like I've seen images of tracks in this shape. It was over 12 inches long. You know, you'll find a couple tracks in the ground in the snow, and then they'll just disappear. And then you'll find another set of tracks, like 2 or 3 of them, and then nothing. Meaning it almost seems like whatever is there for a moment and then gone, and then there again and then gone. Like, it can just disappear. You get really weird things happening like that. And I experienced, you know, a set of tracks in Nordegg back in the first Wildman film, where we would find 2 or 3 tracks and then nothing. And, you know, I would kind of write that off to it being like, oh, the creature stepped in the soft moss briefly, and then it maybe jumped onto a fallen log and continued on that way, just in an effort to hide its tracks. Before I was about to leave, the property owner was like, yo, let's just go back out to that one track and measure it with a measuring tape. And I'm like, well, you know, like, I'm going to be back tomorrow probably. We can just measure it then. I had the camera packed up already. I was ready to leave. It was getting late. I think it was like 12:30 at night. So I was ready to get out of there, but he's like insisting we go measure this track with a measuring tape. I'm like, okay, whatever. Now, I thought this was just going to be a quick 5-minute thing. I wish I would have taken my camera back out of my vehicle and had it running, at least the audio recorder running. Because we went back, I did have my phone in my pocket, so I had that. But when we went back to the track, we measured it, and we were just hanging around there for like 5 minutes, roughly. All of a sudden, we heard the sound of these loud, fast footsteps running through the snow, not too far away, probably like 30, 35 feet away in the trees, right in front of us.
Hello?
I'm just trying to talk to it. There's a horse running around back there? Oh, it scared the shit out of me. That's very strange. It must have gotten out somewhere. Oh, my heart is racing. Oh, God. Just seems weird that a horse would be running down there.
That's the first time in, like I said, I bought this place in August. It's the first time I've ever heard a horse.
I hope that horse is what made those running noises, because I was starting to freak out there.
There's nowhere for it to run down there, just bush.
It was as clear as day. Like, both of us heard it. And I looked at him, I looked at the landowner. He's looking into the trees, like, he was physically shaking. I could see him shaking how scared he was. My heart was beating out of my chest. You know, I was terrified because I didn't know what this was. I had Bigfoot on my mind, so I thought it was Bigfoot. And then I call out to the thing, and after I call out to it, it makes a horse sound, like a neigh. And it was very distinct, like it sounds exactly like a horse. So I'm like, oh, there's a horse running around back here. And I have that sound on video. Like, it's definitely a horse neigh. It's a horse sound. Now, not too long before that, about 20 minutes before that, when we were still in front of the house, just standing there listening to sounds, I had heard that horse sound in the complete opposite direction. And he didn't hear it at that time, but I said to him, like, I just heard a horse. Is there horses around here? He's like, no. If you heard a horse, that would be the first time, like, a horse has been heard on this property. So I'm like, okay, like, it's not necessarily weird, because, you know, someone could just get a horse at any time. But thinking that within that 20 minutes, this horse got all the way around the property to exactly where we were and was running through the trees where we're looking for Bigfoot just seemed very, very peculiar to me. Didn't make any sense. It's as if the horse snuck around the whole property and went right to our location pretty much. Now the weird thing is, just past those trees where, you know, this horse or whatever it was seemed to be, it's a very, very steep embankment that a horse wouldn't really be able to run across or run along. It's incredibly steep and dangerous. You actually have to be really careful when you're walking along the edge, especially in the snow. You don't want to slip down and fall because you will get injured.
Hearing a horse isn't unusual at all, especially in rural Alberta. To me, this incident isn't anything more than that. A horse in the right place at the right time, no matter how much of a coincidence it is. I didn't see a Sasquatch and I didn't see a horse, so I have to conclude that the most likely culprit was the horse. There are people, however, that would argue that the Sasquatch is known to mimic the noises and calls of other animals. This hasn't at all been proven, just speculated. It is strange that every time I visit the Bigfoot hotspots near Nordic, Alberta, I tend to always run into groups of wild horses. It's an animal that the Sasquatch would indeed be very familiar with. These wild horses can even be found at the famous habituation site, where the well-documented tree structures are found.
Keenan from the Alberta Sasquatch Organization and one of our friends, Josh, came up to this location to investigate it. There was the three of us and the landowner. This was 2 nights later. Keenan showed up way before us. He was there all day looking for things. Walked the whole property pretty much, and back behind the house where the slope was, and there's like a beaver creek down below. Didn't find any signs anywhere of a horse. And there's snow everywhere. You can see other animal tracks. There was no horse tracks at all, which was very weird. Now when I showed up and Josh showed up and we were all there exploring, we did the whole property again. Searched everything pretty much. No horse tracks to be seen whatsoever. So I'm trying to imagine this horse that was on one side of the property, you know, sneaking around and going close to the house to where we were, not leaving any tracks. And it just seems very, very strange to me how a horse could do that and just take off without us even knowing. You know, there was no signs of the horse except the sounds that we heard. But we also heard the running, the heavy footsteps, and I kind of tried to replicate those running sounds in this clip here that I recorded. I wish you could have seen that track the other day, because it was textbook for like a snow track. And it kind of was, it was the same direction and pretty much the same path as the one that was in the ditch. Just on the edge of the property there. And like I said, there was no mistaking those footsteps, dude. They sounded like they were 20 feet away, and it was like, but it was louder than, like, it was louder than it was f***ing scary, dude. And then I'm like, hello? I yelled out a couple times. He's like, why are you calling out at it? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, because we
have
to do something, right?
Yeah, and then after I called out at it, it made the horse know.
Like a name? Like,
yeah.
Oh,
but there's no horse tracks.
No, there's no horses.
And the first time I heard the horse was way over in that direction. It must have had to, if it was a horse, sneak around the whole property without us knowing. And wait till we're right in that spot? Like, coincidence?
Yeah.
It was very bizarre, man.
No, it's just one of those things where if 5% of it's real, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
5%, 1% is terrifying.
But like I was saying before, like, the feeling that I felt when those footsteps were happening, was, that's how I would feel now if I was surrounded by them.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It wasn't a nice feeling.
No, it's not. No. No, I mean, I'm glad you came out and had that experience, because I've been very comfortable the whole time we're here. Maybe it's because there's a bunch of us, maybe because it's well lit.
Well, I was comfortable that whole time up until then. Even like going back to where he saw it and I'm setting up the camera, I wasn't really nervous at all.
The significance of this silly horse occurrence isn't that we may have experienced a strange case of Sasquatch mimicking another animal. In fact, that's highly unlikely. To me, the significance is that, like I said when I was talking to Keenan, I know how I would feel if I had a real close encounter with one of these creatures. For those quick few seconds, I 100% believed I was about to come face to face with a Sasquatch. and I froze. I just stood there in fear, and I didn't even think to run. It's very scary when you think about it. Luckily, my next trip out wasn't going to be alone, but with a couple of other experienced team members.
The other thing too about it is, so he started calling the neighbors today too, eh? The thing that's creepy about his sighting is it's right where the children's play fort was for the dead child.
Dead child.
Yeah, the previous owners, their child died.
Oh, that's great. So this place is haunted.
Well, the little girl or little boy or whatever, if they're haunting the place, they're haunting it as like a 8 or 9 foot Sasquatch. So I sent you a photo of what the pinning looks like. So there's an actual sapling. Well, I wouldn't call it that. It's not exactly a spring chip, but it's been pulled over under a tremendous amount of force, and then an adjacent structure was for a tree was pulled over and used to pin it under pressure. So this massive arch structure is created right next to this possible tree structure, and it's pinning the one under pressure. It looks a little bit older though, like it's been there for a while, and the pressure may be released off of the arch now, but they're right adjacent to where it's been coming in. This one here. So you see this one here?
Yeah.
It goes all the way up. Look at this pressure that it was pulled under and pinned with this other log here.
There's no way that could have happened from this falling on it.
Yeah, I know.
The only way I could see that happening naturally is like snow weight making it bend, and then this guy falls on top.
By coincidence during the winter
Yeah,
season.
exactly. Yeah.
That is a very reasonable thing. But like look, so yeah, so both of these are both rooted still, I believe. But this one comes over under tremendous pressure.
Yeah.
And then this one perfectly pins it. So,
Oh yeah. These tracks here are really easy to see, eh? Like at least 3.5 foot, 4 foot stride right here.
is this it again?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean it's
Could be a deer. Deer can do that.
well the part where it becomes interesting
Could be done
is
there.
when you start to find out whether or not it's traveling underneath logs or if it's traveling over them. Because we were noticing snow displacement where something's putting its heels up, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing, right, we're not finding them underneath logs where it's doing it underduck.
Yeah.
And you guys want to go for a north-south walk up to the power lines and back?
You want me to take the dog with us?
Yeah, I honestly think that'd be a great idea too, because she's obviously very sensitive to it too. And she looks like a
Sees better, hears better, smells better.
Yeah. You have all these elements. You have the footprints in the snow. You have the tree structures. You have these weird sounds. You have the guy reporting rocks getting thrown at the windows. And he also was reporting that the night before, this creature was looking in his bedroom window at him. So the guy claimed to have had 2 face-to-face encounters with the creature. He said he was about 20 feet away from it, and it was kind of crouched down in the bushes looking at him. And the second time he saw it, which was the night before we were all there, it was looking in his bedroom window at him. That's what he claimed. There was no tracks by the bedroom window, so that story can't be verified at all, unless there is a paranormal element where it was like a manifestation of this hairy beast, looking into his bedroom window, which is highly unlikely. But I ended up setting a trail camera up down where he had the first visual sighting. Didn't pick anything up. Nothing at all.
Like the subtleties of their existence though, right? Is like a tree knock, an owl imitation, a chickadee imitation, whoop or a whistle. It's all just so subtle that it's almost like built around things that they know we can ignore, that we can write off as part of nature. Right? I was half asleep the first time I got grabbed through my tent, but I still remember even on the first time that it grabbed me, like the grip was still on my head when I pulled my head forward, and I had to pull it out of its grip. That was pretty interesting. And then I was up on my shoulders in my tent, and so I was in like a semi-reclined position, and then after 20, 30, 40 seconds, the hand came back and grabbed me again for 45 seconds, a minute maybe, and then I had to pull my head out of it again as it's palpating around my scalp. And so the second one was what solidified it for me. But after 2 years, like you know, it's almost like I'm slowly chiseling away at my own belief in what happened. But for like that, it ruined that whole day for me because it was so real, and it was real. But like every certain number of months, certain aspects of like my details of the memory and stuff, they just kind of become clouded. And I don't know if that's like myself protecting myself from
just
from
natural.
it's a trauma though, right? But one thing about like, in my experience of watching my own memories kind of fade and change, you know, I couldn't tell you which direction the moon was in, or, you know, exactly where my truck was parked and stuff like that. But it still all felt really real. And, but watching that, what that's done for me is when I do listen to a lot of these other witnesses, I've talked to them on the phone, I've gone back and forth with them about in emails and stuff, but you especially see it in person and on the phone. As they are recalling something that happened to them 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years ago, like they're trying to communicate with certainties so they don't look like, you know, I think this happened or whatever. You know? That's not, you know, that's not how they want to communicate. So, but when I think of my memory and I think of how the slight details are changing in my head, and I even find like between 1 year of telling the story that like I think I've mentioned a little detail differently this year than I did last year. If I do that every consecutive year for the next 5 years, am I still even telling the same story? I'm sticking to the same path, but I'm, you know, like the little stuff changes. And I wonder how much of that happens with other people. Because a lot of the times what they're describing as well is a trauma, you know, a traumatic memory of coming face to face with one of these things in the woods or whatever. And we like to think, oh, it's a trauma, it's ingrained in your brain, it's the most vivid, lucid thing that you have, you know, possibly in your mind. But that's not the reality of it. The reality of it is that those memories change and fade and stuff. So one of the things about like John Green and Renee DeHinden is they used to grill Albert Osman about his story, and they'd go back after months, after weeks, after years, whatever, and they'd have him retell the story. And then they're always looking for that aha, gotcha, like you said its palms were gray and this time you said its palms were black, your whole story's bullshit, you know? And that was just so vicious. But like I said too, I wonder how many people I talk to over the phone and talk to in person who've had these encounters. Like the details are changing, and no, I mean, and then, you know, at some point it's just gonna be like, maybe it was all just a dream. It's just it's crazy like that. But one of the things that kind of,
Is that someone, are they still standing there, or something throwing something at that tree? Because that's happened 3 times now.
those are rocks hitting the same tree
Are they rocks?
or something.
Because something's breaking, or is it Josh and Wade?
Josh!
Yeah.
How
Are you-
far, are you guys throwing stuff at us?
No,
How far are you guys?
I'm not sure where.
I'm right here. I'm looking this way.
Something's hitting this tree right beside us.
It's like pebbles, like 3 or 4 times now, knocking off this tree.
Let's wait and see if it happens again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like fairly distinct impact.
We're having a meaningful conversation about Albert Osman. Weird spot for that to be happening in between us.
But
It would be coming from...
originally I thought it was like a twig snap.
I know, that's what I thought too, but it happened 3 times.
We've had like 3 or 4 pebbles bounce off this, this one that snapped up at the 8 or 9 foot range. Now that we're paying attention, it's stopped, but it was continuous for a second there.
What's that? Is that your hand?
I don't think so. It looks like a paw. Doesn't it look like a paw?
Yeah.
Or maybe like a fist? I don't think so. It's too. It's actually frozen in there. It's like, yeah, it's just like a circle. But it looks like a paw. Like somebody put a paw up there and then took the paw off.
Look at the paws.
If it was around here, we f***ed up.
definitely two eyes on the ground.
How far? Like at the edge of the gully?
Yep, that way, right up the gully.
That sound reminds me of the binoculars on Jurassic Park, the night vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see like through the well, not through the trees, but
Not too far.
you can see into them pretty decent. Whereas like with mine, you can see kind of just the brush in the front.
Yeah, yours you see the front really well. One thing would creep me out is I saw something that I thought was a tree.
And then it
stand
moved.
back and the tree was gone.
Yeah. Just like that.
I think the weirdest thing about these cases is that they don't seem to necessarily happen in the places that you would expect to find Bigfoot activity. So a lot of these supernatural Sasquatch cases are happening in somewhat populated areas, or, you know, agricultural areas just out of a city. They're not in the extremely remote mountainous regions, you know, like the Nordic area, the habituation site. That's really remote and out of the way of, you know, human life, really. I mean, there's a couple little settlements nearby, but for the most part, there's not a lot of people. It's very secluded. It's somewhat difficult to get to. But these supernatural Sasquatch cases happen in more populated areas, meaning the creature has to be much more elusive. You know, if it wants to stay hidden, if that's what its goal is, which is what it always has seemed to be, you know, the Sasquatch has always been a mysterious, elusive creature. That sole purpose that we know of is to, you know, hide from people. It's almost as if the Sasquatch are trying to communicate with people. You know, they're trying to let us know that they're there, because, you know, especially with the mind speak cases where people are hearing these forest beings speak to them, you know, using telepathy, that's obviously them wanting to communicate. And, you know, there's cases that go so far where, like, the people will say they know the names of these Sasquatch. You know, they'll actually have conversations with them. They know their names, where they're from, why they're here. I'm sure a lot of them are just claims and stories people are making up. They have to be. Some of the cases remind me of like the Billy Meyer UFO case, where there's this incredibly intricate story made up that would make you think that it's real. Like, it's so intricate, there's so many details, that it is easy to believe if you don't look very deep into it. And some of these supernatural Bigfoot cases have these intricate stories with these like names and like what the creatures are here for, and, you know, they're an alien race from another world, or it gets very, very weird. When you're looking into the supernatural Sasquatch theories, well, not even the supernatural Sasquatch theories, when you're looking into all Sasquatch theories, and when you're looking into reports and encounters, as much as it's like an investigation of the Bigfoot, it's also an investigation into people and the way people think and people's minds. So it's very interesting, especially when you go out to a location where there's been a report and you meet that person. You're kind of trying to figure them out as well. You know, not just the activity that's going on. You're trying to read that person to see, you know, how credible they are, if there's anything else going on in their minds or in their lives that would make them think that there's a creature around. It can get very weird.
There's aspects of how the paranormal believers and the UFO connection believers see it, where it's just this different perspective, and they start to talk about things differently, and I've learned things from it too. Because it's funny, because they're just like Corey. It's weird because Corey's out there still doing field research and stuff like that. She, you know, produced that samurai chatter stuff, and she told me, she's like, I was a gigantic, like this Blackie believer my whole life, and then when she got to the other side of those, what they call cluster migraines, and she's like, something had changed in me, and I could start hearing their voices when I went to the woods. And I was like, where were you for the first time you heard their voice in your head? And she said, Washington. And then later in BC, now in Alberta. And she's like, at some point, it's like flexing a muscle. The more often you try to talk to them, the more you can get, the more frequent you can communicate, and from further distances. Now it's at the point where she's like, yeah, I can do it casually from home. So she's like, this is flipped at 180 degrees on its head. Yeah. You know, they're living, thinking, breathing people, and they seem to be able to communicate in basic English. And, you know, like the Morley family that I went to go see, the wife, the native American wife, or Native Canadian wife, she would say, like, you know, like, we'll be straight up with you, like, we've only ever seen them as like flesh and blood stuff around here, like with our own eyes. But all the tribal knowledge is, you know, she's an elder. You know, they do have those powers that people talk about. And one of the things that kind of scared me about that is, A, that makes it way more terrifying. 2, it's like, it makes it impossible to find them. But maybe that's what they need to.
To make sense of everything that's been happening, I decided to turn to my friend Peter Schenk. Not only has he experienced his own bizarre Sasquatch happenings, but he's a guy who turned his passion of the spiritual and metaphysical realms into a full-time career. If anyone was going to be able to make sense of these strange occurrences, it's him. His no BS, straightforward way of thinking is always appreciated. He goes with his gut feeling most of the time, and never claims to have all of the answers.
Hey Peter, thanks for joining me today. As you know, I've been kind of exploring the, I guess, more the paranormal and supernatural elements of the Bigfoot topic, the really fringy stuff that nobody really likes to get into. And well, I wanted to talk to you specifically because you've had encounters, and I kind of believe that it fits in with what you do. So if you want to go ahead and tell me, you know, what you do and how you got into this topic.
So, to be clear, my background was not always what I'm doing today. I have a 20-year career working for one of the world's largest investment banks in technology that I left back in 2015 to kind of really pursue my passion, which is creating products and services to help people in the spiritual world. And my journey in this world started back in the summer of 2004, where I had a wake-up experience that, if you can imagine seeing your whole world in black and white, and then at the speed of thought, you see everything in high-def color. That's how radically, you know, my perception of reality changed. And over the last, 15, 16 years, I have been creating, building products and services, the stuff that science fiction books are written about. And I approach everything I do today from an analytical perspective, which I worked on in my professional career. And when I left there, I brought to bear this amazing tool set that you can only learn in that environment to, do what I do today from, just a down-to-earth approach. Everything I do is very simple, it's easily explained, and it's ultimately backed up with results from the user community via testimonials, whether they're written or video. So I've had one sighting and two very strange encounters. And Sasquatch, Bigfoot isn't new to me. I've always been fascinated with this creature. And early on, when I was probably 13 or 14, I was in the Boy Scouts. We were on a hiking trip up in the Adirondacks in northern New York, and we were camping out for a few nights on this old shooting range. And the shooting range, was completely clear where all the tents were set up. And then there was one road that it's like a little access road that came up through the side. And there was one night I woke up, maybe 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and I looked out of my tent, and clear as day, I saw a person walking up the road, stop, kind of look at the moon. The moon was out a little bit that night, and turn around and walk away. And I didn't think much of it until years later when it was, the topic was brought back up. And when I think back to that night, could it have been a person? Yeah, it could have been, absolutely. But who would have been walking around that late? Why would they have been walking around that late? And, I don't remember detail. I do remember it was a pretty big person. Whether it was hairy or not, I don't remember. So that was a strange encounter in my life. And then recently, over the last couple of years, I've had, two other encounters. One, I'm an avid drone flyer, so I'm constantly producing commercials for my products. So I do a lot of drone flying to capture some really cool footage. And we were in an area that was pretty rural but heavily traveled, And, you know, about 50 feet off the path, I look over and there's just a log kind of balanced in midair, maybe about 4 feet up, that probably weighed several hundred pounds. I mean, I walked up to it, and even though it was balanced, I could barely move it. So, you know, that was kind of strange. And then the weirdest experience that I had, we were up in North Conway in 2016, and that's New Hampshire. And we were driving, just me and a friend of mine were just off the beaten path, you know, 5 miles in the middle of nowhere, trying to find a trail up to the top of this mountain. And, you know, I'm very used to energy work. I mean, it's what I do, it's what I excel at. And, you know, I teach a lot of courses in energy mechanics and how stuff works behind the scenes. So when bad mojo or bad energy comes to me, I can spot it really long before it gets to me and shut it down before it creates any harm or, you know, it makes me uncomfortable. The experience I had that day, I had never had before. And it was pretty simple. We're driving, and all of a sudden, I get a feeling like I shouldn't be there. And this feeling just grows into this overwhelming sensation that you're scared. And I'm a grown adult. There's very few things in the world that really scare me, especially in an energetic field. And, you know, just by what I do naturally, it was not a psychic attack. So then I started to freak out a little bit because I didn't have any defense. So I felt something being projected off to my left. And then, you know, after I kind of got my marbles around, it started coming from the right as it was coming from the left. And then there was something slightly off center. You know, in my opinion, this was a coordinated effort by something, okay? Was it Bigfoot? I have no idea. But I have never in my entire life had that feeling of being scared and uneasy at the same time. And, you know, there are animals in nature that, you know, have this ability to give off this infrasound to scare their prey, or to just say, basically, get out, okay?
When you felt these things coming from different directions, was it more like a mental thing coming at you, or did you physically feel like ill at all?
First it was mental, then it turned physical. And the physical part was the aftershock of the mental part. It was very frightening.
Right.
And it wasn't just me, my friend felt it too. And when I looked at her and she looked at me, you know, there were no words to exchange. It was full on experience. And she was like, yeah. I was like, yeah. And after about 30 seconds, I couldn't see anything. Not that you could see much that time of year in the woods. I mean, you know, one of these things could be 20 feet from you and you never see it. But we left. And I was in a very large SUV, feeling kind of safe as we were driving around. And at that point, I got visibly shooken up.
What do you think the Sasquatch is?
That's a great question. So I can only go off my experience in, you know, the spiritual aspect of what I do today, my belief system, how it's been changed, and of course, you know, some facts based in science. So for me, it's not that much of a stretch to really believe that there is a Sasquatch, possibly thousands of them around the world, living in the woods. And, you know, there's been many examples that where, you know, people have said they have seen things, and then later on they're proven to be real in science. And you could look at the great ape. You know, they were relatively not known to the world up until 1910, 1920. You know, the tribes that lived in the area were always talking about these great mountain gorillas that lived up there, and everybody was like, yeah, no. And then all of a sudden, boom, you know, today they're, you know, they film them all the time in the wild, and they have them in zoos. So I personally believe that it is an offshoot of the human species, however you want to use the correct terminology. But I do know that, you know, for a certain amount of time, there were 6 species living at the same time next to Homo sapiens, which is us. And for whatever reason, you know, nature decided to take them out in whatever way they did, and we, you know, prevailed over time. But is it really that much of a stretch to believe that there could be another, you know, species of humans possibly living out there that have adapted to their environment over thousands of years and you know, to become the apex predator? I don't think it's that much of a stretch.
What I really want to get into is, you know, the really weird stuff, the interdimensional Bigfoot theory. If you're familiar with that, what is your opinion on the interdimensional Bigfoot theory and the paranormal?
I don't particularly know what the baseline for the interdimensional Bigfoot theory is, but from what I've read, what I've seen, what I've heard, it probably goes along the lines that Sasquatch has some type of way of teleporting itself into another realm and making itself invisible. And I have a hard time with that, believing that. You know, what to me is much more viable solution is really based in nature's adaptation to a creature, right? So there are some YouTube videos out there, and I don't know the guy's name, but they took Bigfoot hair and they place it under a microscope and they shoot these lights into it and it starts growing green, right? So basically that's a natural adaptation of camouflage. So when these beings are, you know, 20 feet away from you in the bushes and you're swinging your camera around looking for it, you can't see it because it's perfectly blending in. That's just a natural adaptation of this particular creature just blending in. You know, it's flesh and blood, in my opinion, like me and you. I don't have the ability to walk into a tree and teleport myself somewhere else. And believe me, I spent the last 16 years on the edge of the consciousness grid studying and understanding how energy mechanics works to bring that to bear in products and services. And I've never come across, you know, any type of ancient knowledge that would allow even me to, you know, just teleport myself somewhere. It doesn't work like that because the mechanics of how things are just don't work like that. And in my opinion, it doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is this thing is the apex predator of the forest and has abilities that we just don't know about that would seem, you know, superhuman. The ability to run across a highway in 3 or 4 leaps, right? That's something that Superman would do. Well, here's an 8-foot hairy dude that can just do it, right? Can they be silent? Absolutely. If you're the apex predator in the forest, you're going to learn to be silent. You know, so we grow up in an environment like this. You know, we have the ability to control our environment. When we're hot, we turn on the AC. When we're cold, we turn on the heat, right? But then when we go out in the woods, we're not in our environment anymore. So our senses are not attuned to, like, you know, an intelligent creature that's out there its entire life and has learned through multiple generations on adaptations on how to hide itself, how to be quiet, you know, and so on. So yeah,
this is kind of a weird question.
Coming from you, really?
Well, I guess they're all pretty weird. But is there any other, like, entities or anything that exist, do you think? Like, beyond what we can perceive?
Absolutely. Everything in existence is energy, whether it's in physical form or non-physical form. And everything in existence has consciousness. There are energies in the universe that have the ability to transverse realities, okay? So as humans, as you know, we have 5 senses to navigate this 3D dimension that we live in, okay? But just outside those 5 senses is a whole multitude of realities that rage around us all the time. Okay, and in those realities are all kinds of beautiful and bizarre creatures that sometimes come into this plane of existence and allow themselves to be shown to our five senses. So yeah, absolutely.
Is it at all impossible for one of these things to be Sasquatch, you think? Is there any possibility of that?
Nothing's impossible. There is a possibility, absolutely. But in my opinion, from what I know about mechanics and how energy works, I just believe it's truly a flesh and blood creature that really has no supernatural powers. What it does have is very advanced natural adaptations to its environment that allow it to seem supernatural in some capacity. They're there 1 second, they're gone the next. Okay? Can I explain all of it? Absolutely not. But again, you know, I'm an really, really formidable in the energetic world when it comes to understanding the mechanics of how things work behind the scenes, and I have not come across any being that's flesh and blood that has the capabilities that are being described by a lot of people out there.
Do you think that the Sasquatch is a creature that kind of limits itself to mountainous and forested areas?
No.
Or do you think, you know, they venture out to
I think they're very, very close to urban populations. Very close. I've seen a lot of videos out there where, you know, they're building stick structures in the back of people's homes where their kids are playing. You know, they burrow out these kind of, I don't know what they call them, wallows or perches, and they're very, very close to urban populations. And you know, there's also stories about them digging in dumpsters. And you know, I think there's a couple guys out there that have done some excellent field work just by getting out there every day that have shown these things very close to urban populations. So yeah.
Do you think it's a curiosity thing, or do you think they might want to maybe communicate in some strange way?
I don't know if they want to communicate, but you know, keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer, right? And if they are the apex predator, you know, what's a better way than getting in close and studying us from afar? I mean, and maybe they are curious, absolutely. Why wouldn't they be? Because we are, you know, wrecking their homes and their habitats left and right. To use, let's use gifting, okay? Gifting is a method by which people leave things to draw the Sasquatch in, and sometimes they leave something in return, and that's pretty cool. But things like apples and chocolate chip cookies and things like that don't vibrate at a higher level. So my advice to you is, if you want to use a gifting way to draw these creatures in, I would use something that vibrates at a high level, that's possibly shiny and, you know, different than anything that they have ever seen before.
I wanted to talk as well about high vibration areas, you know, the ley line phenomenon. And, you know, how would one go about, I guess, finding a high vibration area? Would you just feel it? Kind of like what you described before, like subconsciously, or? That's
a great question. So the ley lines, I believe, are all mapped out already. You can find a map of those probably just by Googling it. So a place like Sedona, Arizona, okay, is known for high vibration, okay, and there are 9 portals that exist around Sedona that the Indians have known about for generations, centuries. And when you go into one of these vortexes, and they are very high vibration, you feel very different. You know, if you are stressed out, if you have anxiety, to some extent, if you're physically ill in some ways, and you spend X amount of time in these vortexes, and they're huge, by the way, they could be 100, 200 feet across, your body chemistry will change. You know, you physically feel just amazing. You feel better, right? So would a sentient creature such as Sasquatch or Bigfoot be drawn to these areas? And believe me, there's plenty of them out in the wilderness that we don't know about. I would say absolutely, yeah.
Finding a high vibrational area in the Canadian wilderness is like finding a needle in a haystack with a blindfold on. In no way do I think I'm capable of using my senses to find one. My best bet was to make one myself, or at least bring one to the research location. Peter's helped me out before by providing me with his tools to use as gifting objects. When you use things such as apples, they're out to be taken by any other living, breathing creature out there. My hopes aren't to have things be taken, but to capture an image or a video clip of the creature. I decided to deploy a harmonic field amplifier next to my camera trap, which is designed to essentially turn any space into a high vibrational space. Hopefully this will be the golden ticket to visual contact as the investigation continues.
What exactly happens to the human body when you take a person from the city, spends most of their time in the city, and you drop them off in the woods for an extended period of time? Are there any changes that go on?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is proven too, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Within 14 days, your eyesight gets sharper, your vision gets more acute. Obviously your body's metabolism is going to change depending on what you're foraging for. So that's just in humans. Now take a species that lives out there 24/7 to survive and has been given an amazing set of physical adaptations, strength, height to become the apex predator in the forest. So you walk into your home every day, you come back in, and everything is a certain way that you just know, and that's where you spend 40, 50, 80% of your time. I don't know. But if you walked out of your apartment and I moved your coffee mug from one side of the kitchen to the other and you came home whenever, you would pick it up like that. So now you have a species that lives in the forest 24/7, right? And they have that ability to see when something changes, right? We don't. But when you are in the forest for a long time, you are definitely going to change on a lot of levels, sure. I think that if you are in an environment your whole life, you're that apex predator, okay? When anything changes in your environment, that there's certainly no advice that I can give you that would help you capture one of these creatures on film. I think only when they want to let you know that they're there, that they will make their presence known to you in a number of different ways. Maybe it'll be a tree knock, maybe they'll throw a rock at you, not hit you with it. Maybe they'll walk out from behind a tree, maybe they'll allow themselves to be seen a couple hundred yards away. That is probably the only physical way that you would be able to get, if they would allow that presence. Now, from a spiritual aspect, it's a whole different world out there. So I truly believe that these are spiritual creatures, right? They have to be. They live in harmony with nature. Okay, man destroys everything we go through. They don't. They live in harmony with nature, and that, by its very definition, is a spiritual creature. The species is going to come to light. It's inevitable. How, when, and where is anybody's guess. But just know this: it will happen.